This is my first video on formative assessment. I'm going to discuss what formative assessment is, why we should use it, and there's some important ways to use it in the classroom. So I had to use my webcam on my computer, so I was unable to use my slideshow at the same time. So I have my slideshow on my phone. Please bear with me. Formative assessment. Alrighty. So what is formative assessment? Formative assessment ranges from formal to informal assessments conducted by teachers during the learning process in order to modify teaching and learning activities to promote student attainment. So that's what formative assessment is, and some examples of formative assessment we're going to talk about today is the first one I have on my slide is observations. So observations can range from teachers observing students in the classroom to teachers observing students' work in the classroom. So it goes from visually observing students working during lessons or during activities, and also observing their work to make sure that they understand the work and they understand what's right and wrong. I think that this is the easiest part of formative assessment. Teachers often don't get to use it as often, especially if they have really large class sizes. I think that it makes it harder for teachers to observe students individually. I've also noticed, especially during my practicums and other in the classroom volunteering that I've done, is that a lot of teachers have TAs grade their work and like their students' work, and so I think that's kind of hard because I don't think that teachers are able to adequately like look and see how well a student did on an assignment if they're not looking at their work. So I think it's important that teachers observe the students' work and their assignments that they turn in. Another thing that we have on formative assessment is questioning. Questioning students verbally and like on having them write written responses is important. When you question a student, you can question them in a variety of ways, maybe like hit their deeper thinking, and have them answer your questions and just verbally, because sometimes it varies between students. Like students might answer a question easier verbally than as writing it. So some students work well. It's a really good way to differentiate too, is by different ways of questioning students. Another thing on my list is discussions. Teachers have discussions, I think, a lot in the classroom, especially as students get older, like in high school. It's easier for students to discuss like book reports, like books they've read, texts they've read. So I find that a good formative assessment. Sometimes I think it's hard because teachers don't have evidence of their assessment, so that's a little bit more something that's difficult about discussions. The next thing on my list is exit slips. We use exit slips a lot right now in the St. Martin's program. We use exit slips when we are presenting lessons to students like our cohort, fellow cohort students. We use exit slips to promote understanding so that we can see how we taught, like how well we did and what students need help on, and you can ask students if they understand the learning target, and if they don't, what is something that you can do as a teacher to help them understand it, which is important. And I think the exit slips are a really good idea to summarize the lesson, because you can talk about what you taught like in the lesson and how students like how they interpreted what you taught. So I think that's important. Another thing that we talked about were learning logs and response logs. That's another form of formative assessment. I haven't heard a lot about learning logs until my class at St. Martin's. One of our professors uses them on us, so it's kind of nice. You can use them at all different age levels. You can use learning logs, and it's kind of like a glorified note-taking process. So students can write down, you put in sections, and students can write down like definitions and things like that. And I think that's important because you can see how well a student paid attention, and maybe how well they explained some things, because they're putting definitions in their own words most of the time. So that's a really good observation. Another form of formative assessment is the graphic organizers. I think that we're all really familiar with that. I think that teachers use graphic organizers a lot when they're teaching. It's kind of nice because there's a variety of different graphic organizers you can use. So students can pretty much put anything that teachers would like in there. So they're really flexible. That's a really good idea to use for formative assessment. Another is peer or self-assessment. I like this part of formative assessment because like in my video 2 that you're going to see when I'm teaching my lesson, my target for our mini unit in this class was, my target D was to have a peer assess your like a student's work or have a self-assessment, both. And I think it's good for students to self-assess their work because I think that yourself is, I mean, you are your own worst critic, and if a student like sees how well they did or they don't think they did well, a teacher can always intervene and be like, no, you did really good in this area, you might have struggled in this part, but overall I think it's good that a student understands why they got a grade and that they know, like, did I follow these expectations? And if you, when you're providing a rubric for a student, they're able to test themselves and grade their own work, which I think is important. So I like that part of, and then having a peer assessment, like, it's nice because it means that, you know, students all need to pay attention to what is expected. So having a peer assessment is good in the classroom. Another thing on my list is, I don't know if you can see it, practice presentations. I find this one really important because I think that teachers should have students practice presentations more in a classroom if they're going to use presentations, because I feel like presentations are a lot of their formative assessment, but students get graded on these presentations that they are not practicing. Like, they don't understand how to do, like, some students don't understand how to do presentations, they don't understand really what's expected, and they're not comfortable with talking in front of people, especially at young ages. It's just kind of odd. So I think that practicing presentations is a great way for formative assessment because you can assess students on so many levels. Like, you can assess them on their content, you can assess them on their speaking skills, their language, and a bunch of different things. So I think that's a really good way to assess students. And then the next I have on there is visual presentations with which is important because you can use students, you can use, like I said, like before, you could use technology, you could talk about language, you could talk about, they can do their presentations in a variety of different ways. So there's a big difference. You can even use drawing. There's so many ways you can assess students, and it's really differentiated, which I think is really important when coming to assessment, especially for like certain like ELL students or disability students. It's just really important. The last one I have is constructive quizzes, which I think that we are all really familiar with. We see quizzes all the time in math, and especially math and spelling and things like those. They'll have like weekly quizzes, and so that is something that I think is a pretty good formative assessment, but there's a lot of other ways I think that are better for assessing students. But I mean, if you need kind of a quick answer, that's always a good one, is just using quizzes. And then one of my other slides is, it says how to perform formative assessments. So there are many different ways to give feedback to students by performing formative assessments, and as a teacher you must always check for understanding during lessons and activities. So I find that really important too, is because students need to understand. Let me see if I can get that on. I'm sorry, my phone's just, or my computer's just not working with that. So yeah, I think it's important that teachers are always checking for understanding in students, no matter what time of day or what activity they're doing, just so that teachers can record data on students and record their assessment so that they have evidence of them learning and how well they're doing. So this is the website that I got my information off of, and it is a good, I might just have to attach the link because it's like not working. It's a really good state website that we used that gave, there we go, that gave good information on formative assessment. So that is all I have for the knowledge of formative assessment and what it is. Thank you.